Hey everyone, welcome back to the Nello Reads channel. Our first malicious compliance story of the day comes from KM Hags. I need to get my priorities straight. A little background. I, 29F, own a home with my fiance, 30M, and we split expenses and housework 50-50. I like to think we contribute equally to the household, but one area we differ in is our work schedules. I am a night owl and have insomnia. He works the typical 9 to 5, and I bartend during the evenings 4 nights a week with one morning brunch shift. My sleep schedule is very wonky, and lately it has been sleeping from around 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. and a sleepless night or two per week. Before you judge, we have no kids, and this works for me. I do my best to stay quiet and want to get things done while I'm awake at night, but don't want to wake him up. Now to the malicious compliance. One day this week, we spent the evening tidying up the house together, and I thought we both contributed equally, and all was well and good. But there were so many dishes that there were some piled up in the sink after we loaded the dishwasher, and they continued to pile up again. This is also a constant issue for us, as he also tends to leave dishes in the sink, even when the dishwasher has plenty of space. Last night, I had a sleepless night, and I spent it quietly in the living room, working on a paint by numbers. Tonight, I came home and was told, "Your painting looks good, but you really need to get your priorities straight," and mentioned the dishes in the sink. Now, this really pissed me off, because most of the dishes were his. I am his partner and not his maid, and I had shoveled our enormous driveway the night prior. But I decided he was right, so at 4 in the morning, I went to the kitchen and did all the dishes. Loudly. He came to the kitchen and asked me what the heck I was doing. I told him that I was getting my priorities straight and doing the dishes like he asked. Little update, he just got up for work, we both apologized, and he said good job on the kitchen, it looks very nice. Thank you to those who gave/are giving helpful advice. I like to think one rude comment and one act of pettiness doesn't define our whole relationship, as these things aren't a common occurrence. Not too much to say on this one, besides that I'm glad OP and her fiance worked it out. It's normal for every couple to fight, oftentimes about very, very dumb things, and as long as both parties work it out, I say no harm, no foul. Our next story comes from Glyph of Ad Blocking. Schedule Black Magic. First, a disclaimer. This occurred in a country that has both an awesome set of labor standards and the common practice of companies ignoring them, especially in my field. I was just starting a new job. The basic contract they gave me had no serious red flags. After signing, the owner asked if I would be willing to work late 1 or 2 days to be able to go home early a different 1 or 2. I told her it was fine as long as it was an even trade. Later she said I should be at work 30 minutes early because work starts at 9 a.m. sharp, which I thought was odd. I met with the manager once before the start date and she said the same thing about coming in early. I decided to see how the rest of the work and schedule went before making a stink about it. If the hours relax and they let us go home after wrapping up, no big deal. I started my first day and the schedule was a train wreck. I'm scheduled to work late 3 days and go home early 1 day. Hours work out to 40, but still not what I verbally agreed to. Breaks are 15 to 30 minutes throughout the day, and our labor standards state that for 40 hours, they should be a minimum of a 1-hour block. Besides the small breaks, work was straight through 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Breaks are unpaid and don't count against the 40 in this country, but are still mandatory. Even after you wrap up your duties, you're expected to stay. Whenever I just mentioned needing to talk about it, the manager just said, "It's okay," or "We can't change it now," and refused to even listen. Cue the malicious compliance. I kept meticulous records of my time and started to comb through the labor standards. More than 8 hours of work per day is overtime. More than 40 hours of work per week is overtime. Any break that doesn't meet the minimum requirements is considered work, so more overtime. The owner asks me for a meeting when I'm on my way out the door. More overtime. After the first month, I handed the owner my invoice for overtime payment. She was livid. Coming in 30 minutes early was a suggestion. No, I was told to do it by 2 supervisors. The breaks add up to 1 hour each day. Doesn't matter. They should be a solid hour, not piecemeal. The meeting was just us talking. You told me you needed to talk to me. You didn't ask. You agreed to work late some days. Yes, for an even trade. This schedule isn't even. Why didn't you talk to us? I tried, and the manager refused. The owner took the invoice and said she'd think about it. Her husband was a lawyer, so I'm sure she looked for ways to fight it. In the end, I was paid, my schedule was magically reworked to meet the requirements, and they begged me not to tell the other workers. Epilogue. I didn't directly tell the coworkers, but I did drop big hints about the labor standards when they asked about my schedule versus theirs. Sadly, they never pushed the issue. During the year I was there, I saw a huge employee turnover. They were simply overworked. One poor worker cried at least once a week. Only 2 workers that were there when I started remained when I left. The turnover led to client retention issues, which led to downsizing for the next cycle. I feel like a lot of these labor laws are in place not only to protect employees, but also to protect owners from being dumb. Like, by not following the laws, it clearly hurts the business because they had to downsize, right? But I'd bet the owner will come up with any other excuse for this downsizing besides the huge turnover from mistreating employees. It definitely has to be something else, right? The third story comes from Shaftway. You're going to assign me to make balloon animals at a site with no kids? Okay, I'll just do my job. Way back in the before times, mid-level chain restaurants would have these people walk around to make balloon animals for kids while they waited for their food. I was a teenager and needed money, so I did this for a while. The restaurant would pay this agency, and they would tell us what restaurant to go to and when. The key to the story is that we were not paid. We worked solely on tips. On an average night, I'd make around $50 in tips over 3 hours. On special nights, it could be as high as $200, but if there were no customers, I'd make nothing. After working for several months, I must have fallen out of someone's favor, and I got assigned to a restaurant in the business district. I had no idea why they wanted someone making balloon animals there. The key audience was kids, and I never saw anyone there under 30. The first night there, I made $5, which wasn't even enough to cover mass transit to and from the location. After being assigned there twice in a row, I complained, but was told that if I didn't go, I'd be banned from any more assignments. Cue the malicious compliance. The next week when I was assigned there, which was the 3rd time in a row, I waited until there were a couple guys at the bar that were a little tipsy. I go up and ask if they want balloon hats. No charge. They were hesitant, but I promised they'd be good. They agreed, and I got to work. I broke out all of my skills to make these hats that were clearly people in a cage. The people were all pink and had prominent bubbles on the chest and derriere. An inflated balloon tied around the waist made for a bikini bottom, and a carefully tied balloon in their hand made for a bikini top. They asked what it was, and I told them a stripper in a cage. They loved it. I got a $20 tip, but more importantly, they went to every person in the restaurant to show off their strippers in cages hats. They demanded to talk to the manager to tell him how awesome it was. The super uptight fundamentalist manager. Manager was majorly pissed and told me to go home early. The agency called, pissed off, but I used my most innocent voice to tell them I was just making what the customer asked for, and I didn't know they'd make a scene. Agency said, well, they banned you from ever coming back. The next week, I was back to another $17 an hour location. Edit, yes, it was in the US. It was probably illegal to not pay me, but it was the 90s. I was a teenager, I didn't know better, and I was happy enough with the money I made most of the time. Perfect example of malicious compliance. Like, wow. Although he took some artistic liberties, OP literally did his job as described. I just wish there were pictures of these pretty crazy sounding hats. Our next story of the day is from Bobbert Gnarly. Sure, the longest a customer will ever have to wait is 15 seconds. So I worked in a fairly large store that wasn't very busy until 3 p.m. and only had 2 or 3 employees on the floor in the morning. We were getting complaints from customers that they'd have to wait a minute or 2 at the register before getting checked out. We were always filling stock in the aisles and weren't allowed to just stay at the register. Management decided that the longest any customers should have to wait was 15 seconds before starting to check out. As I always do when given tasks that contradict each other, I ask, hey, what gets priority? Getting our stock out or ensuring this checkout happens within 15 seconds? They confirmed that it was the customer service and that it was a top priority. Perfect. I had my cart of stock and I was in charge of the register. My cart was about 7 seconds of walking time away from where I could view the register, so I literally walked for 7 seconds, checked the customer out, and walked back for 7 seconds, which left me with a single second to do stock before having to walk back and help the next customer. Normally, you can get a cart of stock out in about 30 minutes. My cart was still quite full after about 4 hours. Management came by and saw me walking back and forth, quote, barely doing any work. I reminded her that what I was doing was top priority, and since I wasn't allowed to stay at the register, that I was accomplishing both my tasks in the most effective way possible. The next day, the 15-second rule had been abolished. Awesome story, OP. Very good job. I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and I will see you in the next video.